We know that LSU's number one need in the spring transfer portal is defensive tackle. I mean, Brian Kelly even said as much that, hey, yeah, the only position we're targeting in the transfer portal is defensive tackle. And there's another defensive tackle prospect that could be on the horizon for LSU.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, y'all? Welcome into Locked On LSU. Thank you for making us your first listen every single day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast. And hey, happy gymnastics NCAA semifinals day. They start off, I'm recording this on Thursday afternoon, start off at 3:30. So make sure that you carve out some time in your afternoon, cheer on the stick queens. I know that I will be doing that. But today we're going to talk transfer portal. We're also going to get into your mailbag questions. Today's edition of Locked On LSU is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side, but don't we all? And my competitive side is a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on a classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. All right, let's get into it because Brian Kelly spoke to the media after the spring game, basically said in as few words, basically the only position that we're targeting in the transfer portal is defensive tackle. Now, I don't entirely disagree with that approach. I always think you should keep your mind open. I don't think that you should be married to anything in particular, but we know that D tackle is the number one most pressing, most dire need for this team in the offseason. And maybe even what you can get in the transfer portal in the spring window still might not be enough, but you got to try. You got to do everything in your power to at least try. On yesterday's edition of Locked On LSU, which, of course, if you missed it, you can find on your preferred podcast platform. You can find it on YouTube at Locked On LSU. Subscribe if you haven't already. I always appreciate that. Always appreciate my everydayers out there. We mentioned a few D tackle targets. One that we know for sure, Gio Paez, the grad transfer from Wisconsin, has already committed to LSU. So you at least have one body in the building. A couple of other targets, Philip Bleedy, a defensive tackle from Indiana, 6'3", 295, visited LSU for the spring game. He's been recruited all over. Auburn, Colorado, Missouri, Oklahoma, Washington. One of the top D tackle targets in the transfer portal this offseason. Another one, a group of 5 transfer, CJ West, D tackle from Kent State. He's a 3-year starter across 36 games, 110 tackles, 19 and a half of those for loss, 7 sacks, had 40 tackles, 2 sacks last season. Another very highly recruited D tackle in this window has been recruited by Arkansas, Texas A&M, Michigan, so on and so forth. So a couple of names to keep an eye on there. No word yet on those 2 D tackles, at least as of time of recording here on April 18th. But another name to keep an eye on. Now, I don't have word or insight. They've put a few feelers out there, but I haven't gotten any return quite yet on if there is interest from LSU, if LSU has extended an offer, if there is a visit on the horizon. But I think it's a name that LSU should at least take a look at. At this point in the offseason, and at this point with how desperate you are for D tackle depth, for D tackle starters, really, you're looking for starters. Depth is great and all, but you need bodies out there. You need players to start for you right now. No stone can go unturned. That player is Simeon Barrow. He is a 4-year starter out of Michigan State. A 4-year starter, redshirted his first year. He has 1 year of eligibility. Coming from Michigan State. This past season had 36 tackles, 3.5 sacks. The year before, in 2022 was his best season, 40 total tackles and 4 sacks. Been a fairly consistent starter and playing in 12 games for the last 4 seasons and has started a majority of those games. So it's a guy with Power 5 experience. It's a guy that can step in and can help you right away. He entered the portal in October of this past season and then ultimately decided to stay at Michigan State. He entered the portal after Mel Tucker got fired, which I get. I understand. Your coach gets fired. There's uncertainty of the future. You want to be somewhere where you actually get recruited. But he ended up staying. He returned to Michigan State, so took his name out of the portal. And then, of course, obviously, after spring practice, has put his name back in the transfer portal. So, like I said, no stone can go unturned as far as the D tackle market is concerned. But I do have one reservation about Simeon Barrow, and that's that he struggled with injury throughout the entirety of his career at Michigan State. I've read several articles. I've tried to, get up to date as much as I possibly can of what kind of a player he is, what kind of a person he is, what he would bring to the locker room. And nearly every single article that I read mentioned how he's injury prone, mentioned how he fought through injury really for the majority of his career, more specifically over the past couple of years. Now, first, kudos to him for working through injury. That tells me like you care about your team and you care about football and you care about getting out there and helping your teammates. Like that means something to me. But we know that when you're fighting through injury, obviously you're not going to be able to play at as high of a level as you can. And a lot of times at as high of a level as your team needs you to play. So that's my one reservation about Simeon Barrow, the D tackle out of Michigan State in particular, is injured players make me very nervous. Specifically, as far as this instance is pertaining, because I need you to start. Like, I'm not looking for depth. I'm not looking for a guy that can come off the bench and can come in for a few snaps or a game or two. No. Like, I'm looking for who's going to be the two to Jacoby and Guillory. Like, who is going to be your starting defensive tackle? Simeon Barrow, if he's hurt, if he's constantly off and on the field, well, then I can't rely on him to be that 1A or 1B, the 2, however you want to look at it. If I can't rely on you to stay healthy and stay on the field, then I can't rely on you, period. What's your best ability? It's your availability. So I'm sure that LSU is going to do their due diligence as far as the injury is concerned. What injury is it? Is it something that's going to be nagging? Is it something that's going to continue to rear its ugly head and keep him off the field? Or is the injury issue something that's, look, it bothered me, I got surgery, went through recovery, and now I'm good? They'll do their due diligence as far as that is concerned, but that is one reservation for me there. Also, one thing I mentioned on the podcast yesterday is when you're this desperate, your standards go down a little bit. So maybe if it's an injury that would originally scare Brian Kelly and this coaching and recruiting staff in any other circumstances, maybe they're just going to have to make do with it because, like I said, you're just desperate. And as much as I've been talking about how LSU needs bodies, they need starters, and yeah, depth is great and all, remember that there is only a finite number of scholarships that LSU can extend to be compliant with NCAA scholarship rules. You can only have 85. Now, LSU has had 4 players leave and enter the transfer portal. Jackson Howard, second-year edge rusher out of Minnesota, second-year wide receiver Kai Brian, tight end Connor Gilbreth, and DB Ryan Robinson, who's going into his 3rd year at LSU. So you at least free up 4 scholarship spots there. But it's not like you can just take every single D tackle in the transfer portal and say, okay, that's good. We feel good about our depth now. That's not necessarily the case. So you can at least be picky and choosy with the options that you have available if injuries are in fact a concern. All right, but coming up next, I normally do Mailbag Wednesdays. Today's Thursdays. Sorry, I apologize. So we'll get to your Mailbag Wednesday questions on a Thursday, and we'll do that coming up next after just a few words from our sponsors. All right, I want to tell you about Monopoly Go. I've been told that I'm a competitive person. I get it. I know. I accept it, and I will admit it. I have a competitive side. We all do. And my competitive side is a big fan of Monopoly Go. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. It's a great twist on Monopoly, where you play on not one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations. You can build up these amazing cities that bring you big money. But the best part of it all is messing with my friends, of course. I can charge them rent on my iconic properties just like the classic Monopoly. But now I can also heist their vaults of riches for myself. And the leaderboards show me who the biggest Monopoly tycoon is. But it's not just my competitive side that loves it. You can team up with friends and people all around the world in timed tournaments to earn huge rewards. So get in the game and join your friends. Download Monopoly Go Now free on the App Store or Google Play. All right, rolling along here, Locked On LSU. Thank you for making us your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And the Locked On NFL Mock Draft is available now. Find the ultimate 6-episode series on Locked On NFL Draft to hear who the local Locked On experts are picking for every NFL franchise, with live reactions from local college football experts and even the fantasy football angle. The Locked On NFL Mock Draft available now on Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Crazy. We're only 1 week away. 1 week from today. Draft is going down in Detroit. It's going to be a good one. It's going to be a blast. I'm excited. All right, continuing along here on Locked On LSU. Today's about you. So let's get into your questions. Enough of me blabbering about transfer portal stuff. First question that I did want to address, speaking of transfer portal stuff, was a very, very good question that came in on yesterday's show. I mentioned the transfer portal rules. And I think by now we are all familiar with a majority of the NCAA transfer portal rules. But one caveat in the spring transfer portal window is that the NCAA bans interconference transferring. And of course, you can probably appeal it. You can write a letter, as so many players have appealed to the NCAA in terms of other transfer portal rules, like the 1-year sit-out rule or the 2-time transfer rule, whatever it might be. So you cannot transfer within the same conference in the spring. You can do whatever you want in the fall, but in the spring, you cannot transfer. Like if you're transferring from LSU, you can't transfer to Alabama, so on and so forth. But this question is a very good one, and it's probably a question that a lot of you have had. This question says, can players transfer from LSU from Oklahoma or Texas since they join the SEC this upcoming season? Very good question. Honestly, that I hadn't thought about. Players, I guess technically it would be considered interconference transferring since Oklahoma and Texas are here this season. But an important reminder there, Oklahoma and Texas right now, they're still Big 12 schools. Like softball is playing in the Big 12. Baseball is playing in the Big 12. Oklahoma and Texas are not officially SEC members until July 1st, 2024. Obviously, the spring transfer portal window will be closed by then. So right now, players that played for Texas and Oklahoma this past year, they're considered Big 12 players because they are Big 12 players. So they can transfer into the SEC. There's not any players coming out from Texas or Oklahoma that I have seen or that I have flagged as potential fits for LSU or D tackles that are transferring. But I wouldn't be surprised maybe if there is a Texas defensive lineman that wants to follow Bo Davis. Absolutely, it's up in the air. The transfer portal is open until April 30th. So players can come and go as they please over the next 2 weeks, give or take. So yes, players from Oklahoma and Texas can transfer to LSU. They cannot transfer to the Big 12. That also applies to USC and UCLA. They can transfer to another Big 10 school, but they cannot transfer to a Pac-12 school because the Pac-12, I guess at this point, still exists. Great question, by the way. Another question, it's a tough one, and we'll digest this a lot, not just today, but throughout the rest of the offseason and leading into football season. It's a loaded question on the live stream yesterday. Will the defense be better this year? And man, the first thought that popped into my head when I read that comment was, I sure as hell hope so. I mean, I hope so. And I do not want to say, because I have been burned by this so many times by saying, well, I don't know how it can be worse. It can always be worse. It can always be worse. So be careful by saying that. But I hope so. So let's break it down. Reasons for optimism, potentially reasons for concern. So one thing that makes me optimistic about this defense being better is because of the coaching staff. That Blake Baker already has a proven track record of turning Missouri's defense around from one of the worst units in college football to one of the better units in college football, just in the span of 2 years. And even in Blake Baker's first season as defensive coordinator at Missouri, Missouri went from like the 120-something ranked defense to like the 50-something ranked defense. That's a massive, massive leap. If LSU had, let's just say, 50th ranked defense this past season, I think they're probably in Atlanta. They're probably even a playoff team. Like they're better than 9-3. So that is market improvement. That makes me really encouraged. Bo Davis, Kevin Peoples, coaching the edge rushers and the defensive linemen. Two of the most well-respected defensive line coaches, and really just coaches in general in college football. I mean, I'll take the odds on that one. And we know that Corey Raymond, what he did, he's the architect of DBU, what he did at LSU. So I already feel more comfortable and confident with this coaching staff. The other side of that, though, is they haven't done it at LSU. Like, you can do things at your former stops, but also I don't know what all of these pieces together, coaches combined with this roster, what they can do and how they can turn things around from last year to this season. That's what I don't know. What's the timeline for how quickly you can turn around a horrendous defense to a decent one? We saw Blake Baker do it at Missouri. Can he recreate that at LSU? Just because he did it once and just because he did it at Missouri doesn't mean that it's guaranteed to happen here. You hope so, and you feel encouraged that he can because he's done it before. But I don't know. What does make me feel better, too, is you've now got those young DBs from last season who were young and inexperienced, Ashton Stamps and Javian Toviano. Well, they now have real in-game SEC experience. They're 1 year older, they're 1 year bigger, and they have 1 year more of experience. So that makes me more encouraged about what they can add to this team this year. Are they going to be your game changers at the cornerback position? No, they're not, but you feel better about your depth there. The bad is defensive tackle is a problem. Like, you do not lose Mekhi Wingo and Mason Smith, who I think are first-round caliber talent. They won't be first-round picks, but I think they're first-round caliber talent. You don't lose both those guys and get better, especially when you don't have replacements. I think, what Brian Kelly said about Jacobian Guillory after the spring game, was glowing about Jacobian Guillory and his spring, how he's come along. So that at least makes you feel encouraged about what he can do. But the position as a whole, I mean, D tackles are important. Breaking news, getting to the quarterback is important. Disrupting the quarterback is important. I don't know who at that position you can say, like, yeah, that is a proven commodity. Because Brian Kelly can talk up Jacobian Guillory all he wants, but at the end of the day, he still has very limited experience. So that is really concerning. Another thing that I don't know if I'm the only person talking about this, but sometimes I feel like I am, and sometimes some people make me feel like a crazy person for saying this. I know I just talked about how Corey Raymond was the architect of DBU, but let's look at recent history. 2020 secondary was trash. 2021 LSU secondary was trash. The past 2 seasons at Florida, the secondary was trash. What do all those things have in common? Corey Raymond coached them. Was that a talent deficiency issue? Yeah, I'm sure there probably was to a certain extent, both at LSU and at Florida as well. But it's not like you've got a room full of the top corners in the country there. So I'm at least reserving, I have some reservations, rather. I have some reservations about Corey Raymond's ability to coach up these corners, at least in today's college football. Because the last 4 years haven't been very pretty. The last 4 years haven't been the peaks on his resume. Like, we know what that aggressive, man defense looked like under Corey Raymond in the 2010s at LSU. Do you have the talent to do that? Do you have the talent to go one-on-one against SEC caliber receivers? Like, I don't know, frankly. We'll see. So all that being said, do I think the defense will be better? Yes, I do. How much better? I do not know. I don't think that you can expect LSU to all of a sudden have a top 20 defense. Let's be real here. Like, let's temper our expectations. But I think that LSU's defense, at least, can tackle. I don't think they're going to give up 700 yards to Ole Miss. That's all I can really give you. I don't think it's going to be an asset. I don't think it's going to be a strength on this team. Well, you might score 50 points a game, which is really going to bail the defense out a decent bit. So do I think it'll be better? Yes. I don't think it's going to be leaps and bounds unrecognizably different. but I'll take at least a little bit of improvement. But what I cannot take is regression or more of the same. That will truly push me to early gray hairs. I can't do it. I cannot do it. The thought of it is making me sweat. More questions coming up next. So wouldn't it be great if you could see all of your investment and retirement accounts in one place? With Yahoo Finance, you can consolidate your views from multiple accounts into one hub and access the expert analysis that you need to tend to your entire portfolio with confidence. So frankly, finance overwhelms me. It scares me and it intimidates me, but Yahoo Finance can simplify things. So whether you're a seasoned investor or if you're just looking for that extra guidance like I am, Yahoo Finance gives you all of the tools and data that you need all in one place. They're the #1 finance destination. They produce a holistic look at the financial news cycle, including breaking news, original editorial perspectives, analyst ratings, independent research, customizable charts, and so much more. So it's so much more digestible information rather than maybe some other sites or other news sources that just throw all the numbers at you, and it's really overwhelming and makes me feel not very smart. But Yahoo Finance has comprehensive financial news and analysis. Visit the brand behind every great investor at yahoofinance.com. The #1 financial destination, yahoofinance.com. That's yahoofinance.com. All right, rolling along here, Locked on LSU. Thank you for making us your first listen every single day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. All right, let's finish up your questions on this Mailbag Wednesday on a Thursday. My bad. Final question. It's another loaded question, but one that I appreciate. Also, just a reminder, if you want to get in on the action on next week's Mailbag Wednesday, feel free to comment below on the YouTube page if this is where you're watching, or I'm always available on Twitter at CarolineFenton1. You can tweet me or you can send me DMs. Always appreciate when you guys interact with the podcast. This question is there hope for baseball? Let's discuss. My initial reaction is no. This is something that I addressed earlier on this week on the podcast, that after you get swept at Tennessee, it felt like to me a lot of my hope, if not all of my hope, just fizzled. Because what is there to have hope for? What should I have hope about? You know, the pitching staff outside of Luke Holman is shaky. The offense is incredibly inconsistent. They leave way too many runners in scoring position. And when you do hit a home run, they're all solos. Like, I don't want to sound entitled here, but maybe we could get a couple of 2 or 3 run bombs. I don't know. Just me. I'd appreciate that. Maybe, a little bit of offense whenever you've already got guys on plate. Tommy White, who was your most consistent and reliable hitter last year in the national championship run, he now leads the nation in hitting into double plays. Like, that doesn't make me very encouraged. The defense is mistake prone. Oh my gosh, how many throws to first base can we not make? Like you're just overthrowing Bear Jones every single time. It's like every opponent that just hits a ball into play, it's going to be an automatic first because you're not going to be able to throw to first. So defensively, I don't have hope. Offensively, I don't have hope. And the bullpen doesn't give me much hope. The only shred of a hope that I have is that the schedule coming up is at least a little bit lighter than it was at the beginning of conference play. You've got Missouri this weekend. Missouri's not a very great team. You're also not a very great team either. So let's get that out there. But when you start the season with Mississippi State, Florida, who was in the national championship last year, Arkansas, who was the #1 team in the country at that point, Vanderbilt, who was the #6 team in the country at that point, and then Tennessee, who was the #4 team in the country at that point. You're going through a gauntlet. You got Missouri this upcoming weekend, and then Auburn, 2 teams that are struggling. You're also struggling. Keep that in mind. Texas A&M, it then comes the week after Auburn. They're the #1 team in the country right now. Alabama's a top 10 team. And then you finish out the season with Ole Miss. It's another team that is struggling. So this feels like a great opportunity this weekend to get a sweep. I know it's on the road. It's hard to play on the road in the SEC. I understand that. But if you want to be a good team, you at least have to beat the bad teams. Like, you haven't beaten anyone. You at least have to beat the bad teams. LSU at least needs to get a series win this weekend. I'd love a sweep, but I'll just take 2 out of 3. If you lose the series at Missouri, all hope is gone. I'm sorry. I don't want to hear any optimism about this team. I don't want to put any lipstick on a pig. If you lose the series against Missouri, you will not be going to Hoover. You will not be in the postseason. And I'm sorry. The LSU baseball that I know, Hoover is not even in the question. It's, okay, are you hosting a regional or not? Like, that's the question. Hoover's just assumed. Hoover shouldn't be in question at LSU baseball, not at this program. So that's my one shred of hope, is the next 2 weekends are winnable. Can you try to figure some things out? Can you start to figure things out? Can you start to find a more consistent lineup? Can you start to figure out where your strengths are? Can you start to figure out how to win games? Because I know that we can look back on the Mississippi State series and the Vanderbilt series and the Florida series in particular and pick out 4 or 5 different things from each of those series and say, okay, well, if those few things went differently, you would have won the series and would be talking about this team in a very different light. And you'd be correct. But we're past that point now. No more of that. No more excuse making for this team. Because right now, this team's just bad. Figure it out against Missouri. We saw Ole Miss a couple of seasons ago. They started, 7-11, something like that in conference play. They turned it around. They won the national championship. I don't think that's going to happen to this team, but it at least might give you a little bit of hope. But let's take care of our business against Missouri this weekend, and then we'll talk. And I hate ending it on that note, but let's be honest. That's where we're at right now with this team. All right, coming up next on tomorrow's edition of Locked On LSU. So let's talk some more baseball, because I talked to a former SEC baseball player that knows this program well. I asked him the question, like, what's going on here? His diagnosis. Do we believe it? Do we agree with it? Do we think that that's something that can be turned around this season and at the very least next season? We'll get into that on tomorrow's edition of Locked On LSU.